Dave, we're here. It's the 80s and we are vibing. What's going on, Dave?
Sam, you need bigger hair, more smoking, worse lighting, and some really uncomfortable and dated slurs.
That's funny, Bites.
Apparently, I'm being told by our production team that that's the joke.
That's the joke. That's the joke. Hey, everyone, welcome to 1984. Well, this is the podcast where we explore
40 years ago.
40 years. We explore all of the movies, asterisks on all, but a lot of the movies that came out in 1984, and we are going to be diving into the good ones, the bad ones, the ones you've never even heard of that Dave has watched, and probably some in between as well. This is a exciting new format for the Imaginary Movie Podcast, but importantly, what's crucial to all this is that we have watched an ungodly amount of movies just from 1 year. We have
one movie a week and then talking about it wasn't really hitting the old dopamine anymore. So now we're watching 40 movies a week and then talking about that. I'm not sure how long we can sustain it, but the dopamine's back temporarily.
Baby, we are plugged into something. I'm not sure what it is, but it's certainly exciting. Actually, 1984 is a banger of a year. Like, we have a heck of a lot of movies that you know and have heard of and have seen probably within the last couple of years. Like, these are movies that aren't...
Yeah, I mean...
It's not the 70s is what I'm saying. Like, you've heard of these films.
All these movies have had sequels or remakes as well. And I will say, just off the top, that had you seen all 10 of these top 10 movies before we get into it, before this podcast?
I had seen, I think, all of them except for... two. I'd say all of them except for two before, which I think is pretty good. I think that's pretty good. It is a
How
highlight
many years can
year.
you say that? I think that's an interesting one, isn't it? Of like, I think there are years more recently where I couldn't say that I've seen all of the top 10 movies, where 1984 was a banger year for movies, as it turns out.
We're going to start off with the top 10, but I think this top 10 is I think really something. So without further ado, let's get into the top grossing movie of the year. That's right, it's Beverly Hills Cop. Look at that amazing rendition.
And we won't get removed from YouTube for it because it's so poor.
Yes, yes. So this
Beverly Hills Cop.
Beverly Hills Cop. Not Beverly Hills Cops, just one cop. It's a singular cop. It's Beverly Hills Cop, which is always something I forget.
It's simultaneously, Sam, this is a great movie that holds up really, really well, and it's simultaneously astounding that it's the top grossing movie of this year.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's one of those movies where it just landed right at the point where it was kind of perfect. You've got Eddie Murphy, probably not... It's certainly not the peak, but I think he's really...
This is the start of Eddie Murphy. This is the first Eddie Murphy movie, I think.
Exactly. This is knocking it out of the park.
And he's never been more charismatic or more attractive than he is in this movie, I would argue.
Yeah, he's absolutely magnetic. And I think when you combine that with the wonderful propaganda that is Beverly Hills Cop, like, that's where I think this movie just kind of crescendos perfectly into... Yeah, this is what America in the 1980s wanted. This is exactly what we wanted, and I think it probably kind of for it to be the top grossing film makes a lot of sense. Not by a lot.
I think it's the top grossing film because it presents something different, and like, not that films haven't starred black men before, but I think that Eddie Murphy really is like a one of one type. Charismatic figure. I think the script is just fine, and it's quite light. Generally, it doesn't outstay its welcome. It's like 90 odd minutes. It's a banger. Yep. We've done an episode on this, haven't we?
This is a previous episode where we got into every single amazing aspect of this movie. I think the other thing we talked about is this is a Jerry Bruckheimer produced film. Which is like, this guy is going to have a career, and I think this is maybe one of the early ones. But I think we also see this type of buddy cop movie progress and become more kind of like this transitions into Bad Boys, and as we and also Turner and Hooch, maybe, I don't know. But like, there's lots of good examples. I think this is a starting point for many of them. It's a great film. It's probably not even the worst aged in terms of the 80s-ness of it either.
Again, we probably get some F slurs, but
there's worse ones on the list.
A bit odd, and the strip club scene because the executive hadn't seen a pair of naked breasts that day, and that hour, and it was enough.
It's one of let's not be creepy about it, right? Let's not be creepy about it, but it has been very, very noticeable how many movies we have watched that feature just casual female nudity. Because it's the 80s and the audience needs to get woken up. I'm not sure what's going on, but it is
I'm sure we can
every
get to
film.
It. But let's get to Ghostbusters. Have you heard of it?
Have you heard of it?
Everyone has 4 mortgages these days. Ghostbusters is the second highest grossing movie of this year, and while I think Beverly Hills Cop is like a really good movie that holds up really well, I think Ghostbusters is a cultural icon in the way that Beverly Hills Cop maybe isn't.
Can I tell you about Ghostbusters? Because we regularly watch Ghostbusters in my house. My 8-year-old.
Please, Dad, please, I want to go to school.
Not until we've watched all of the special features and the DVD commentary, and then even worse than that, Ghostbusters 2. Because I think this movie does actually hold up incredibly well. Now, I would say there are some suspect things in it. There are some things where you're like, well, okay, let's just fast forward that scene. But the music is great. The ghosts are great. It's funny. It's light. It's people running around New York blowing things up. And I think there probably isn't a movie that we're going to talk about that is more iconic than this, as you've said.
And it spawned a million sequels. Like, obviously there was Ghostbusters 2, which, well, I said about the better, but, you know, an animated series, the Femme Ghostbusters, I'm sure there's a better term for that movie, and the new, and several movies after that, and the merch. This is very popular property, and kind of like also, I think, you know, maybe solidified Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd.
The whole
kind of stars.
The whole kind of crew. The new ones actually, I think, are pretty decent-ish. Like, we're not the first new one. I think is okay.
Have we argued about this on the podcast?
I think we probably have. We can maybe get back and listen to that. But I think the reason that Ghostbusters, for me, holds up as well, and one of the reasons why it continues to get put on is because it's a good comedy. Like, it's a comedy movie that I think that buys into its own joke and is really, really emphatic about, yeah, there's ghosts. What of it? It's not a science fiction movie. We're not making a science fiction movie necessarily. We're not making a horror movie. We're sitting very firmly in this is a funny film. It's light. It's engaging. I mean,
it's solidly
Sigourney Weaver
concerned about explaining overly what's going on. Sigourney Weaver as well. I think.
God damn it!
Is this the first time we saw Sigourney Weaver being funny? Like, that's.
It certainly lands so well. Like, she's so good in this, and the actual gravitas that she brings to, like, compared to basically all of these stupid white men being silly in the rest of the cast. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a weight that you need. So a heavyweight actor coming in from Sigourney Weaver. Another movie that we've done for the podcast. It's Indiana Jones. No, not any of the other ones. It's Temple of Doom. The most racist movie of 1984. I mean, that's a bold claim, but
I mean, there are already other movies on this list that are quite racist.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? I recently was listening to an episode of Laser Time where they go in depth on Temple of Doom, and Chris, one of the hosts, kind of made a good point, which I hadn't really like on the podcast. They coalesce it really nicely in that it's his favorite Indiana Jones movie, which I absolutely don't agree with.
That's insane
because it's kind of like. Because it's that bit darker than the other Indiana Jones movies, because it's a prequel, and because it's kind of like it's maybe a hero story in a way that Last Crusade isn't, because Indiana Jones starts the movie off as such a heel. There is kind of like and that's something I think we maybe didn't touch on when we went through it on the podcast. And I don't know, I don't think we need to be forgiving of this incredibly white Western movie that is not very respectful to the whole subcontinent of India.
Anyone who's not a white American man, because we also get George Lucas and or at least Spielberg and probably Lucas as well, going through several divorces or whatever else that's happening in their lives, and they really, really just don't like women at all. And we get that in Willie's character, who is
go back to our episode, because we really didn't like this movie on the rewatch, and I think we did a good job there in breaking down all the problems with this. And we don't have 45 minutes on this episode to talk about the Temple of Doom, because ultimately, does this movie deserve us to keep talking about it?
It doesn't, but I think there is something that sits in my head where I think, oh, that's a good movie. It's a good movie. And you know what? For the first 10 minutes, it is a good movie. And then it just all falls apart. As soon as they got on the plane and they're crashing in the Himalayas or whatever.
Just
Jesus
stupid
Christ.
city.
Stupid
but,
city.
Fortunately, Sam, I say this all the time. This is one of my favourite movies.
Gremlins. Okay. Gremlins.
Like, I'm going to say it. I've watched this movie more than any other movie on this top 10 list. I watch it every single year, sometimes twice a year. I think it's such a phenomenally fun movie, and no one does puppets anymore. I miss puppets in movies.
Yeah, it's one of those really like iconic 80s movies, in that you've got a film that is actually quite scary. It's kind of doing the opposite of what Ghostbusters did, isn't it? Is that you've got this crazy idea, ghosts exist or gremlins exist or whatever else, but we are going to lean into the fact that this is going to be quite brutal, quite scary, quite kind of violent. Kind of doesn't make a lot of sense when you really break it down, but because the rules of the movie, which is something we talk about all the time on the podcast, isn't it? The rules of the movie have to be absolutely set. Because of that, everything is sold perfectly. They sell all of the creatures and through the puppets perfectly. They sell the scared reactions.
It's a good kind of like suspenseful movie that if you step back and think about it for even a second, it's silly as fuck, because they are puppets. It's puppets smoking cigarettes and like murdering old ladies, but it's fun. It's fun in a way that I think so many movies that came later trying to sort of go for the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The puppet slasher movie, like they don't capture this level of fun, and everything's playing towards that. It's a snow globe movie. This whole movie takes place in a town that feels really small and compact and empty, and do you know what I mean? This is a movie that doesn't feel like it takes place in a wider universe, which for a lot of movies is a bit of a drawback, but for a movie like this, I think just kind of like allows you to live in that world and, you know, enjoy these gremlins, watching Alice in Wonderland or whatever, or Sleeping Beauty or whatever film they're watching. You know. Yeah. It does kind of like you're gonna get something that goes either really, really well in this format, or it's going to be terrible. And I think they managed to land it. One of my favorite facts about this movie is that when they were testing out how what the gremlins should look like and how they should work, they tried to use monkeys, and it didn't work because the monkeys panicked when they were made to wear a gremlin head. And I just think that's where we are in 1984. We are, at least the early 80s. We're putting helmets on monkeys to try and make them look scary. Each one of these gremlins, because they're animatronic puppets, each one of these gremlins cost about $40,000 in 1984.
We're on the verge. It's amazing.
And so they had to basically like have quite strict security on the set, and they were checking people's cars because they couldn't have someone like go home with one of these gremlins, because like, you know, it's not a super high budget movie. Like, it's a lot of money to replace them.
It's
mad.
It's absolutely
and now
crazy.
You just CGI it and it will be boring as sin.
There is something about the physicality of it. It's probably the same.
Real light hitting real things is just
it's
fun.
It'll be
I always go hard for puppets.
Yeah.
Don't clip that. Don't clip that.
That's definitely staying in. That's definitely staying in. David Newell, 2024. Let's get into the next movie on this list. Don't think it has any.
Speaking of racism,
it doesn't have puppets in it, but it does have some other dodgy shit because it's 1984. Everyone, it's The Karate Kid.
Sam, this is a charming movie wherein an old man who fought for America. He fought for America. His wife and his child died in an internment camp during World War II. He fought
an
for
internment
America.
camp that was in America, to be clear.
Yep,
the Americans interned
This is
Japanese
a movie
people.
in which he conquers adversity and cons this kid into fixing his house and painting his fence and sanding his deck. And
wax
cleaning
on,
his cars.
wax off.
Wax
now
on,
do it
wax
again
off.
40 times. Yeah.
Yep. It's a wonderful story.
It's a wonderful story. It's a good film, isn't it? I think this is a good film. I think it's like one of those movies that it's not quite nostalgia for me.
I think this is several bad movies in a trench coat with a good score.
That works.
And I think the effect works. I think the effect really, really works.
Don't you say a word against the trench coat, because the trench coat is doing all the heavy lifting here of let's bring all
but
this.
That's sometimes the way, isn't it? Sometimes a movie is it's not a good movie. Like it's a lot of wasted stuff. There's the love plot line. There's a lot going on, but it kind of brings it all together in quite an impressive way. And so by the end of the movie, I'm sat there thinking, is that how karate works? And I'm still unclear about that. But I'm entertained. Are you not entertained? Yeah, I am quite entertained.
I'm quite entertained. I think it also has. I think some really interesting, not fight choreography, but like fight drama.
There's a believability. There's a believability in the way that Daniel wins the fights. You don't, because like he's a skinny little kid. It's Ralph Macchio, but there's a believability in the way that the movie's shot, where it kind of like it feels like he is earning these victories, and he has. Do you know what I mean? There's a thing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is some like serious martial arts people behind this. So I do think like we do have to give the movie a lot of credit in like capturing what was going on around this, because again it's the 80s. We're kind of are we maybe exposing some of this stuff to Middle America and bravely talking about like karate and kind of Japanese culture a bit, and trying to maybe push through some of the collective ignorance.
This year had a huge impact on obviously the movies we were making and the movies that were making money, and you can kind of tell by everything we've talked about has had a sequel or a sequel series in the last 2 to 3 years.
It's incredible.
Apart from Gremlins, I would say, but Beverly Hills Cop just had a sequel. Ghostbusters had a sequel last year or the year before. We had an Indiana Jones film recently. There's the Cobra Kai series, and they're making another Karate Kid movie.
Franchise city. We are.
No, but
pushing.
This stuff lives in the brains. I think that the people who are watching these movies as kids are now the executives, kind of like saying, "Yeah, make more of that. I love that."
Green light. Here's what shouldn't have been greenlit. I tell you, to God, it's number 6 on our list, making $81 million. It's the Police Academy movie.
We make Steve Guttenberg a star. We do.
We're gonna get sued. Do you want to get sued? So this fucking movie, man. I've seen this once before, and then I rewatched it because I'm a absolute glutton for punishment. This is absolutely diabolically shit. Like, this is such a shitty
garbage,
movie,
isn't it?
And it's shit on so many levels. It's racist, homophobic, misogynistic. Like every single one that they could hit, they hit. And on top of that, it's also not funny. Like there's not many jokes that really kind of are even trying that hard. There's maybe like 1 or 2 that actually land, but almost consistently I didn't really laugh. I didn't really kind of look up away from my phone for more than 20 seconds to see what the fuck's going on now. Like, this felt like a really long movie, even if it was only 90 minutes.
It's lowest common denominator, unfortunately. And I always say this when I go to the cinema these days to see a movie. I'm always amazed at just the breadth of people in the movie, and I'm like, why do you all come out tonight to watch this movie? And Police Academy is kind of like, it's that movie in its the most purest form of, there's kind of something in this for everyone, but simultaneously there's not enough in it to make it a good movie for anyone. But there's a little, because it is stupid. It's kind of it's a cop movie about people who, like, the antithesis of cops at the time, and I think it's the common man thing. It's the slobs versus snobs thing in this movie that appeals to such a wide audience. There's also quite a decent range of genders and races in this movie, and that's not always the case. It is an ensemble movie, and yes, it's a white man in charge, and yes, he reports to a white man because it's still 1984, mate. But I think a lot of people may be latched onto some of the things that you just weren't seeing on screen elsewhere. How this movie spawned fucking 6 sequels, I cannot. They all made money.
It's an incredible thing. I was kind of thinking about where this sits in the... surprise, listener, we've not done an episode about this. But I was kind of thinking about where this sits in the array of kind of sex comedies. And I thought that Porky's was after. And it's not. That was 1981. Even something like Revenge of the Nerds is... when was Revenge of the Nerds? I fucking lost it. Here it is. That was 84, so that's the same year. Like, so as we go through a lot of these type of movies, Stripes, that was 81 as well. And it makes it very clear that Police Academy, this is a derivative film. This is not a film that is bringing any originality. We've done this already. We've done the 80s
and they did it
comedy.
another 6 times, Sam, because the formula was, let's make a movie for no money, and then we'll do it some 6 more times, and we'll continue to make diminishing returns, and nobody will come back, and that's fine.
I
don't think we need to talk about this movie loads because it's bad. It's a bad movie.
Shoot it in the head.
It's the worst movie on the top 10 by a country mile, and I'm including the Temple of Doom in that. I think Temple of Doom is a more fun watch than Police Academy.
100%.
And we hated that.
Yeah. Well, let's go to number 7. 7th top grossing movie of the year, 80 million. It is a previous episode. It's Footloose. Footloose. What do we think? What did we think about this, Dave? I can't remember what our general opinion is. I didn't rewatch.
I think we generally liked it. I was surprised I liked it because we'd only watched it for the podcast. But I generally liked the performances, and John Lithgow's fun. Kevin Bacon, of course. It's a fun movie.
Yeah, a movie where
culturally very large, batting above its weight, I think.
I think so. It's certainly a film. I think when we watched it, we referenced the fact that we only knew about this from American Dad or Family Guy episodes. Like Simpsons, like that. That's the cultural touchstone for us, isn't it? I think what's interesting about Footloose is it's kind of like a magic movie, because when they go and no one's dancing in this town, and it's like quite salacious that Kevin Bacon is dancing. I think one of my criticisms was like, why is no one dancing? Like, you just the whole point of this should be a magic movie. This should be a movie where everyone has forgotten because there's some evil witch to dance. Because the whole basic idea of the movie kind of doesn't make sense. You've got this one kid.
Completely. It's that America has a strange relationship with religion.
Yeah.
And it plays way too big a part in their government.
They're all basically Mormons. Suddenly the movie makes sense to me. But that, like,
well, they basically are. John Lithgow is like this evil. Like, there's a horror movie version of this. I'm sure we talked about the podcast, but there's a horror movie version of this where John Lithgow has all the kids murdered at the end.
He's
for the greater good.
For the greater, he's slamming his fist on a Bible for several minutes in this movie. Like, it's an insane. But again, it kind of captures where America is again, and this is what. As we've got 3 more movies to talk about our top 10, but this is what I'm really loving about this format, is that you get such a snapshot of where at least the West and at least America was culturally emotionally, ecumenically. Like the whole thing is really informative in that sense. And I think
I don't remember there being too much really objectionable stuff in Footloose, and it's fun. It's a silly premise, but it's a good outing for the cast.
Yeah, you know? Nice and light.
So I think
keep it
generally a one thumb up from us on that one.
One is that good? Out of 3.
Well, two thumbs is like that's 100%. So one thumb's 50%. That's kind of where I rate Footloose. Like it was good, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't memorable particularly.
If you're doing a podcast where you watch all of the movies from 1984, it's definitely one of those movies from.
It's definitely one of those. It's definitely a movie from 1984.
Yeah. Okay. Well, another movie from 1984, shock horror in the format that we are doing today, is Romancing the Stone. Oh, I went into this again knowing almost nothing other than references from other TV shows, and I loved this movie. Robert Zemeckis and starring Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. This is a cracking, old-fashioned Indiana Jones adjacent adventure movie, and also kind of romantic as well. And I just really enjoyed this.
It's a little really racist.
Every movie in the 1980s is, Dave. We can't. I mean, if we're going to just
specific kind of racism. Specific white people in South America kind of racism, which I think we give a pass to because largely that's the only representation of South America that we get, I think.
Drug dealers and organised criminals is certainly where what this movie's going for as well, isn't it? Like we get a lot of that. But I think I enjoy it, and you're 100% right to call me out on that, is because indulgently it does hark back to those 30s and 40s adventures, like that we don't really know, but what we know is the modern representation of those type of movies, and exploring, like, we've got this MacGuffin that we need to find, and that's the adventure. We have to get this thing, and the fact that they managed to bring in, I think, a really effective character played by Kathleen Turner is what's different about this, though. Like, we don't have Willie screaming like in Indiana Jones. We have someone who actually is kind of involved in the plot and making decisions and all the other stuff.
It's a fun movie. I do kind of wish we got more movies like this. I don't think I've seen the sequel, or maybe I have. But they only made 2, and it feels like I kind of wouldn't be amazed if there were 7 or 8 of these, because it's fun, it's light, it's not overly plot heavy.
Mm-hmm.
The cast is good. The location shooting is really good. Douglas and the
Kathleen
female
Turner.
lead, Kathleen Turner, have really good chemistry. There's a sex scene, of course, because it's 1984.
It is raw. I mean, it's not raw, but it's going for it.
Do you know what it is,
again,
Sam?
Though,
it's suggestive, and it's 2 adults just have sex because they're adults and they want to have sex, and the movie isn't like. That's not what the movie's about. And there was something refreshing about this example of that. And there are other examples as we get further down the list where I'll certainly have different things to say. But in this movie, it just feels like these are 2 adults, like, having sex and happy. And it's not what the movie's about. I don't think it's overly graphic. It's just sex exists in movies, and pay attention, Hollywood directors.
Yeah, keep up. Keep it up. Hey, there we go. Let's go to number 9 on the list, which, quite amazingly, a Star Trek movie. And Star Trek, yes, it's still alive and kicking in 1984. It's trying. It's The Search.
Unfortunately, Sam, it's not one of the even-numbered Star Treks, and therefore it's not good.
I think this is one of those movies that I've got like a really rosy memory of in my head, and as soon as that memory hits the contact of oxygen and life, it's just going to get absolutely, because I think this can't be a good one, can it? Because the next one, 4, Voyage Home.
Do you know what? To be generous, because I think, like, Star Trek nerds, and we are Star Trek nerds, but we're not like Star Trek nerds. I think to be generous,
there's a difference.
I think most of these movies, I think there's only really one really heinous movie, and it's the one Shatner directed, number 5. That's really bad.
Number 1's bad as well.
Number one's a bit boring, but like there's stuff in there that's good, and it's quite. I don't know. I think this is better than number one. And we get good Klingon baddie. It's Christopher, Back to the Future guy.
Yeah,
Christopher Lloyd. Christopher Lloyd is the baddie, and he's fun, and you get the whole cast. And yes, it's not one of the best ones. It comes after Wrath of Khan, which is probably the best Star Trek movie, and before Voyage Home, which is the most fun Star Wars movie. That's the one with the whales. And on that list, it maybe is fourth or fifth in terms of how good the movie is. Because again, number one isn't great, and number five is really objectionably boring and dull and weird.
Yeah. What I appreciate about this movie though is that we're continuing the story, and I think that's quite a brave thing to be doing. Like to say, by the way, you need to have seen at least the film before this to have any idea what's going on. And a lot of these movies do that, and to hit number 9,
3, and 4 are sequential. Like there's no break between.
You need. I mean, this. If you went into watching this without seeing Wrath of Khan, you'd be absolutely clueless.
Well, I watched
Spock.
I watched Voyage Home. I'd never seen any of these movies, and I remember watching Voyage Home at my dad's when we were teenagers, and being like, knowing that I've missed something because that movie just opens and it's like,
yeah.
We've had another movie. We're crashed on Earth in a Klingon warbird, and I'm like, huh?
Shut up! There's whales now. Like there's. I respect it. I respect doing that. They would never ever do that again because every movie needs to be out of standalone. But good for them. They're off stealing.
Good for you.
Good for you. Well, good for you, William Riker. They're off.
No,
it's the other one. It's the other bearded guy. They're off stealing the Enterprise to go find Spock and whatever. It's all good. It's all good stuff. So let's hit the last movie on our top 10.
Last and certainly possibly least.
Oh, this is Splash. Tom Hanks's breakout role, and holy shit on a stick. This is a deeply, I think we say problematic movie, but also kind of shitty as well. Like, this is just not a very good movie.
Do you know what this movie is, Sam? It's.
Can we explain? Could you explain the premise before we do that? Explain the premise.
I was just going to say, I was going to give you a bit of an elevator pitch, right? So, you're the executive. I'm the down on my his luck writer. Okay, so it's Little Mermaid is an enduring and popular Disney animation, classic Disney animation, right? People love it, and the people who grew up watching Little Mermaid, they're now adults. So, what if we did The Little Mermaid, except it takes place in New York City, and it's a bit of a... And I'm going to reference Pretty Woman, which is confusing because Pretty Woman didn't come out for another 10 years.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like a Pretty Woman thing with, a sexy young guy and a sexy mermaid in New York, and they're adults. And that would be like an interesting, she's an ingenue in New York, and she's from the bottom of the sea, and she's in the Big Apple, and that was very popular in '84. And there's a lot going on here, right?
It's absolutely,
they're definitely fucking, right?
They're definitely. So that's the most confusing part of this movie. So we've got Tom Hanks is playing this kind of. He's not even a yuppie, is he? Because he runs like a fruit market or something in Queens. I mean, it's
he's a yuppie. No, Sam,
it's a bizarre choice.
You're burying the lead. This is a movie about a mermaid who fucking becomes obsessed with a small child who falls in the ocean, stalks him to New York, and eventually kidnaps him back to the ocean at the end of the movie.
It's staggering. Well, I'd say kidnap. I think my main problem with this movie is that Tom Hanks is deeply a sexual predator in this movie. Like, he absolutely abuses this woman in a way that is insane. So she rocks up at a police station, can't speak English. Tom Hanks, but has Tom Hanks's ID.
Daryl Hannah, by the way.
Yeah, Daryl Hannah. From when he fell in the ocean or something. It's very complicated, but basically, he takes her away. She starts kissing him because she remembers that when he was young, he'd just been at the beach, and so anyway, it's complicated. And they just fuck. This woman can't talk. She is in a nightgown. She's been walking around the Statue of Liberty naked in this. And Tom Hanks thinks, perfect opportunity. This woman is absolutely able to provide consent for this. And I know this. I know it's an 80s movie and we shouldn't, we have to keep it in that perspective. But it soured everything else after this because I'm like, dude, no, you can't do that.
But that's and the movie tries to diffuse that, Sam, by having it be Tom Hanks, who is still kind of shithead Tom Hanks era.
It's
still Turner and Hooch
it's
coming
his first
like
proper role. Turner Hooch after,
this is still Tom Hanks has kind of got a bit of an edge. I think Tom Hanks 10 years later, he's doing Forrest Gump and Big, and he doesn't have the same sort of like unlikability he had in the 80s. And you've got Tom Hanks, and his general charm is meant to diffuse it. And then also, because Daryl Hannah is the instigator, again, you've got all the fucking perverts saying, she wanted it. She was asking for it. And I agree with you. I don't think it works. I don't think it works at all. I think it's creepy throughout.
Let them have at it. But in like 10 minutes after they do it, she's speaking English and she's actually like, oh, she's not mentally ill. Brilliant. This isn't a mentally ill woman. There's something going on. We'll figure it out, and she'll end up being a mermaid. Fine. But on top of it, hold on, there's more. We've also got John Candy in this, who is doing I think, cracking job of the wisecrack kind of brother, lecherous dude. Fine, this is good, but then he's not used really, and every scene is begging for him to be there. And in fact, John Candy should be the protagonist.
Every single scene in this movie, I'm asking, where's John Candy?
Where's John Candy?
Is he safe? Is he all right?
Where's Poochie? Why isn't Poochie on screen right now? Like it is, but it's ridiculous.
It's such an adult movie.
Where's what's the tone here? That's always a question we ask, isn't it?
It's a movie about mermaids, Sam, but it's for adults because they are banging.
Yeah.
Banging, like, quite clearly throughout this movie. There isn't actually any nudity, I don't think. Well,
no, there is. Yes, there is. She's naked. Do you remember?
Is there full frontal? She's naked a lot, yes.
No, I'm not sure if it's full front, but it's more than you would accept on a Sunday afternoon watching this, in a two-parter with like it's not happening.
But there's like later on, John Candy says, and again, he says it in Swedish. He says, "I have a 12-inch penis," and that's fine because it's in Swedish, and you can assume that most movie-going audiences don't speak Swedish. But it's subtitled.
Who
so
knows?
That means that anyone who can read, including children, can read John Candy saying, "I've got a 12-inch penis." For kids.
But the problem is that I think we've already mentioned it. I think we're in the hangover of these actually clever kind of sex comedies that were.
This one is a mess. There's a reason, by the way, that neither of us have seen this, and it hasn't had the cultural.
I'm amazed
that every other movie on this list, for better or for worse, has had a larger cultural impact than this movie because it's bad. We haven't even mentioned Eugene Levy, who is
Eugene Levy's
staples to this movie.
He's like this, like
you keep saying Levy, Sam. It's Levy, right?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. He's got this whole like where he's trying to prove that that mermaids exist, and that's his. And then he becomes kind of a good guy because there's like a random museum is going to cut this woman open. I mean, that's what's happening. It turns into a horror movie, and then Tom Hanks just abandons his entire life. We don't even get a scene where he kind of waves fondly at John Candy, his brother. He just fucks off to the sea. And what do we see at the end, Dave? We see this disgusting matte painting of this underground underwater mermaid city, and I'm like, what? This was nominated for
in a roundabout
the best
way. This movie got us Band of Brothers, and so I guess it was worth it.
That'll do. That will do.